But I was talking about the similarities between Natalie Wood and myself. And one of the things that really is like personal, embarrassing, and I mean, Natalie Wood had such a great life, really. I can look at my whole life as, somewhat unpopular and shameful. I truly think it is the negative of her opposite. I mean, the negative to her positive. But here's one thing that really struck me is the fact that her mother really dominated her life. My mother really stepped back. My father really dominated everything. And my father told me very young that he had set up a trust fund for me. It was right after the company he was working for had gone public, and it was at a really good time in his life financially. And so I got to tell you, it fucked me up. I'll be quite frank with you. I was too young to even think about these matters. My brother is 2 years older, and it confused me as to all these things. I mean, I felt both dependent and advantaged, and I never really liked it. And I must admit that the most inspired and happy times that I had in my life are sort of now, and the more free I get of the the money situation in life, the better I feel. But this is very hard to explain to somebody, and I'm a fucking entitled person, and I feel the hate, all right, from this all around. So now picture Natalie Wood. She's making a living for her family at age 12. She's loved all around the planet. She doesn't feel the hate, believe me. But I do, and I felt the hate a lot. And it really manifested itself when I came to Vermont, because the rumors preceded me. I mean, the night we moved in, the farmer, we had just asked some questions during the purchasing of the house process, whether the field that came with the property, the 10-acre property, could be used for horses because it was near the river. And we just asked these questions to see what the value of the property was. And at that time, we had no immediate intentions to put horses on there or anything like that. The night we moved in, farmer knocks on the door. Didn't knock on the door, pounded on the door. And when I opened it up, he did not even introduce himself. I didn't know. I assumed he was the farmer because Russ Lamphere was an old farmer. And he shouted out, "You can't have horses on that field. The manure is going to run into the river. I'll report you to the state." And that was welcome to Vermont, And then I was part of a homeowners association, and they just sued me to sue me. 31 people ganged up on me, and even getting legal representation. My lawyer was a crook, but that's a whole different thing here. But in Vermont, until I moved out here to Barton, which in the kingdom is a friendly place again for me, and I love it here. And I hope these videos don't change that. The people out here are friendly. But when I lived in Hyde Park for 18 years, 17 years, I felt a lot of hate around there because if you go look at these videos, you'll search and you'll see that I have a criminal record. It's a misdemeanor, but I appealed it because I didn't realize how dishonest my lawyer was. And he's a guy by the name of Peter Langrock, big reputation, all these things. And he's been in the business a long, long time. And I started with Sharon Green's office, and the judge was a guy by the name of Ed Cashman. And Ed Cashman had no problem handling all of the motions and stuff concerning a he said, she said assault case. Now, I'm a 6'5" athlete who is quite strong, and I study martial arts. And at that time, when I was accused of a crime in 2003, I was a red belt, okay? And the reason why this matters is if you ever look on the testimony, the perjurers, they said, "I've told everyone around that I was a black belt." This was just a total fabrication. It's what we call perjury. And the person committed multiple acts of perjury making up a story. But what I didn't realize was that my lawyer was trying to get me convicted. And the reason why was there were two lawsuits involved. One, this homeowners association that I had to buy into was suing me, just the ultimate definition of a frivolous lawsuit. They brought up a case where they were going to try to unilaterally modify my deed. Now, think about that. If you own a deed, your neighbors can't come up and change your deed. That's just, you would think, really simple. And I took it for granted and kind of laughed it off at the beginning. But what my lawyer, Peter Langrock, saw was an opportunity. So I wasn't comfortable with Sharon Green's office. Just there was a lot of local stuff involved. And I asked my parents to ask around. And my mother knew her friend's husband worked at University of Vermont. And they asked around and they recommended a guy by the name of Peter Langrock. Now, Peter Langrock was honored by the state of Vermont. They paused the legislature to honor him after some 50 years or something in the bar. But to tell you what a misstep that is for a bunch of lawyers to honor another lawyer, they probably did it because he helped make them rich. And the way he did this was, as soon as I hired Peter Langrock, my next hearing, Ed Cashman changes to a retired judge, a guy by the name of Alan Cheever, Judge Alan Cheever. Now, it turns out Alan Cheever was a client of Peter Langrock's. Now, I didn't get any of this. I was scared. I was in a new place. My home, its deed was on the line, and I was also being brought up in front of a court of law in a place that could have and did have lasting effects on my life. But my lawyer, he somehow got it switched to his client. And I cannot, if you want to believe that's an accident, then, you don't believe any of my other videos, okay? But Vermont is a small place and a lot of people know each other. But having your client as a judge and get into a frivolous lawsuit, you could draw that out until you drained your client dry of money if you wanted to. There would be no limit if you had the judge knowing what you were trying to do with this. So in the criminal case of he said, she said, where the guy, anybody who's seen Will Smith strike Chris Rock on the Oscars, they said that I took a wild swing and clocked him on the nose, but no damage to his nose, didn't want to go to the hospital or anything like that. And that was it. I just struck him like that out of the blue. I took a sucker punch on him, okay? And at that time, I've been a red belt, but I had studied martial arts for many, many years under a bunch of different disciplines and all like that. And I knew he was an untrained fighter the way he was standing there. And I wouldn't dishonor my training by sucker punching somebody. And if I did, just a basic lesson, you would triangulate a punch in a powerful way towards the center of your body. I wouldn't take a roundhouse at close range, leaving myself vulnerable for him, if he was a martial artist, to clean me out. So this is really quite stupid. But it didn't really matter, because for Peter Langrock, he came to the trial dressed in fur with a fur hat, looking like a pimp, in front of his other judge, obviously sent in front of his friend who was a judge. They've known each other since 1967. And he obviously giving signals. And then he didn't, when it was his chance to direct examine me, he didn't do it. He had gone up for a brief cross on Joel Page's, the state's attorney's direct, but never came up and let me tell my story. But the reason why that matters is he told me not to say very much to Joel Page. So I had a whole story to tell, and I never got to tell it in a court of law. All right? And Pete Langrock, his closing remarks, I wish we were in Scotland. I was shocked. I'm like, I'm innocent right here in the United States. You're throwing in the fucking towel. So I thought that he thought that I was lying. And it didn't matter. He thought that I was the Flatlander, cocky young guy in a house he probably didn't deserve. And I was upsetting the people. And he could make endless money by if now his judge doesn't like me. And they go in and start filing motions that are frivolous. And that's what he did. He had delayed the criminal trial. Against my wishes, I said, let's get over fast, until his son Fritz had filed a motion for summary judgment that should have ended the whole trial. But Fritz didn't counter in a very lawyer-like fashion, supporting with evidence, like I would when I eventually fired them and represented myself by learning the law. But Fritz didn't go to the town offices and check the deeds and do the things that he needed to do to defend me, because he didn't want to. He went up in front of Cashman knowing that if they could go to trial, they get paid for discovery, they get paid for trial fees, and it's very lucrative over a person trying to unilaterally change my deed. Now here's Vermont for you. I fired Peter Langrock. I enter that I'm going to defend myself as a pro se. Suddenly, I don't have Alan Cheever as a judge anymore. Shifted out again. The next judge I had was a decorated vet from the Iran and Iraq wars, Howard Benthuizen. And Benthuizen, of course, said that Alan Cheever was in error. He ruled that Alan Cheever was in error. And it was a lucrative error for Peter Langrock. And I went on and won without trial. That means they had no right to due process. It was as frivolous as a case can get. But it left me with a total mistrust of the Vermont court system, that the lawyers are a little too close to the judges. And I'll document this and put this on the web because it's the truth, and I have the right to say the truth. So thank you very much for sticking into that part. So I've seen the hate and I've seen prejudice because the court didn't rule in a proper fashion. That homeowners association has continued to harass me for 20 years. So, if you get injustice, it continues on an injustice. And the problem is, I have a whole different personality. The one movie that moved me was Gandhi. When I saw even martial arts movies, Bruce Lee in Enter the Dragon says, I practice the art of fighting without fighting. And then he outsmarts his opponent by getting him onto the dinghy and letting it loose off the boat and letting him float away. And I learned martial arts because people were getting in my face because I was tall and they wanted to challenge me, and I didn't want to fight anybody. I was just out to have a peaceful life. But when I learned martial arts, I knew that I would be able to block and defend myself. And it also changed my stance, my attitude, and people didn't bother me anymore. And that's why I learned it, not to go bullying people around as I'm alleged to have done. It has a life of its own. Just this last year, they were holding a meeting. I haven't gone to the association meeting, but they're again trying to alter the rights I had under my deed without me having a say. So there's legal stuff going on. And again, there's legal misconduct. I send out a cease and desist order to the Homeowners Association again this year. And now they've hired a guy by the name of Carl Lissman. And Carl Lissman is with the firm of Lissman Leckerling, and they have contracts with the Vermont government, and the Attorney General at the time was T.J. Donovan, and T.J. Donovan sits on the board with Leckerling for the Howard Center. All well and good, but they're very friendly with each other, and Lissman Leckerling has been getting a lot of contracts from the state of Vermont. But what I did was, I didn't know that at the time, but I sent a letter around saying, hey, I've asked you for the trustee minutes, which I'm entitled to under Vermont statute of law. I've asked you to open up your books to me, which I'm entitled to see under Vermont statute of law, within 5 days of a date specified by me. And it's so that things aren't altered and so forth. And this had gone on for months. They hadn't sent this, and they were planning to reincorporate because I have the controlling property, an original clubhouse property there that has all sorts of rights and exclusions from their restrictions. But I said, look, if you don't comply, I'm going to contact the Attorney General, and I said after a specified period of time. And I just let it go. And then Leckerling sends a very disparaging letter. I mean, not Leckerling, Carl Listman sends a very letter just really dismissing my cease and desist ordering, not putting anything. He's refused to represent me and all that. And then I then decided, okay, now I will follow through and contact Attorney General Donovan's office. They refused to take my call, and they said that I would have to look that up with the state's attorney. Then I contacted through the records to see if Listman Leckerling had contacted them by phone, which would be illegal, because Listman Leckerling would not be allowed to take a private matter up. But what happened was I got a letter back from Charity Clark, who is now running for Attorney General, and Charity Clark said that, hemmed and hawed. And I said, well, Listman Leckerling contacted them. A simple no that they didn't is what I'm asking for. And since what I'd like now is an affidavit, I mean, because the Attorney General didn't, he's a public figure and he doesn't have attorney-client privilege. I said I'd like an affidavit from Attorney General Donovan. And what happened was Attorney General Donovan then timed, and I can show you the emails, he says he's not going to, he's going to resign from office. And then when I, later on in the year, I asked Listman Leckerling for an affidavit, because I could be entitled to an affidavit for them as to what transpired during that phone call, which no one has denied. And I said, you have until, Friday, whatever, the date. And Attorney General Donovan resigned on that date. So I wasn't able to file a motion in court and get him to testify as to how law firms can contact the Attorney General on private matters when they're public employees getting contract. And so you can see the world isn't always how you think it is. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes socializing, shall we say, and it corrupts government for people who are innocent like me. And I speak the truth, so I have no problem putting this on the internet. But this legal thing is an episode in itself. But in my life, I've been faced with a lot of hatred because of my false conviction and because of 30 people, 30 lots, suing me to get me to move out of my house because of what they call flatlander prejudice, because I was coming from out of state and they had rumors about money and all these various things about me. And I can't address what the rumors were, but I do know that the rumors preceded me, and I knew that people were saying stuff that wasn't true. And but it was a tough time when I was trying to raise a family. And, I contrast that to Natalie Wood's life where, she was very much beloved by the public and all that. And she's very impressive in her interviews and all the ways that she carried herself as first class. And I've been, portrayed as much less than the way I feel about myself. And it's hard on me, it's hard on my children. But it was really interesting. My love for my children is the same as Natalie Wood. And it was for all of their birthday parties. I used to pull all-nighters to clean, and I would do all the cooking myself. I would have various salads, fancy, cool salads like salmon salad and all these things, and I'd get recipes, pasta salads, and I'd do burgers, and we get a water slide, one of these inflatable slides and pools and things, and I just loved having parties, and I stay up all night, and then I would just collapse after everybody left. But it's funny, when I was watching how Natalie Wood had all those parties, I was like, I bet she had a caterer. So anyway, that is a little bit more of my life of opposites. I mean, it goes on, and in this I explore a lot about dates and names and things like that. I become very fascinated with names, and the reason why I become so fascinated with names is because names we think are completely free choice. They're really free choice. And if I can show you how interconnected names are all the time with my lives and the meanings of names, and even in the scripts of movies, which again you would think would be random and free choice, but without those people in the 60s who wrote these scripts, or in the 70s, or even the Chris Carter, the author of X-Files, knowing they could be writing out things that have a perfect timing for me to see at just the right time in a magical kind of design. And so anyway, this is going to conclude like the distractions from my next episode, which is going to be talking about the energy of the meteor and that meditation and things. And a lot went up to that, you know. At this point, after the second meditation, I mean, I was really on a whole different journey. But anyway, that's enough for this episode. And it's funny, if it seems deeply personal at this point, or whether I don't care whether law firms sue me or not, it's true, because quite frankly, you know, if Peter Langrock and Carl Lissman want to sue me for defamation, you know, you got to prove the truth. And so, you know, I would love to get Alan Cheever in deposition, and I would love to go and you know, have a law firm or paralegals look up all the rulings of Alan Cheever and Peter Langrock over the years and how that affected the case. I'd like to look at the kind of proceedings, because I know I was vulnerable to a huge bilking. So, all right, that's it for frivolous lawsuits. Natalie Wood supporting her family, my father setting up a trust fund for me, and really kind of, frankly, giving me privileges, and at the same time making me face a lot of hatred in life, a lot of resentment for the gifts that I had, and a lot of backlash from that in my existence, which, you know, as the earner from her family since age 4 on, I can assure you these emotions were not one that Natalie Wood had, nor do I share in the sort of satisfaction that she had in being basically an economy all to herself. So I hope you've enjoyed this this latest episode. I go on, and it's deeply personal, but I hope you've enjoyed it, and take care. Freedom of speech in America started here in a trial in 1735. John Peter Zenger was a German immigrant printer of New York. Zenger printed the New York Weekly Journal. He was arrested by colonial Governor William Cosby and spent roughly a year in prison because he printed articles exposing the governor's extensive corruption. Zenger didn't create the articles, only published them. The publication's owners found a Philadelphia lawyer, Andrew Hamilton, to represent Zenger. The jury had been instructed by the judge to rule that John Peter Zenger was guilty of libel, if, under the legal definition of libel at the time, he was found to be printing anything that disparaged the governor. But Hamilton argued that the prosecution failed to prove that a single word that Peter Zenger had printed to be false. How could it be libel if he printed the truth? Then he said, "The question before the court and you, gentlemen of the jury, is not of small or private concern. It is not the cause of one poor printer, nor of New York alone, which you are now trying. No, it may in its consequence affect every free man that lives under a British government on the main of America. It is the best cause. It is the cause of liberty." The New York jury found Zenger not guilty, a precedent often cited, and the freedom to publish the truth without imprisonment began. New York was 109 years old, and it took place on the second floor of the building that stood in this place. This right eventually fueled a rebellion for the cause of liberty and for the protection of the rights of people against tyranny. Unless you were enslaved, this is the cradle of liberty and much more. Our first national government was formed here. The Bill of Rights were written here, including the First Amendment. America inaugurated George Washington, the first elected president of the United States, here. He was a man so loathing of the title that he referred to his assumption of duties as taking the chair. This place was also the host to the most deadly terrorist attack of its day. 12:01 p.m. on Thursday, September 16, 1920, when an unidentified terrorist group set off a bomb in front of the offices of J.P. Morgan. 38 were killed, and over 300 were casualties. George Washington's statue remained unharmed. Acts of violence happen over and over and over again, mostly the same way, with a car bomb or a truck bomb, or in this case, a horse cart bomb. That's except for one day when what happened was the most different act of terror the world has ever seen. It took place just blocks away at the World Trade Center.